The cold steel of the bench had become a familiar anchor over the last 5 hours, its chill seeping into my bones despite the stale, overheated air of the precinct holding cell. Outside, the world was a dull hum of traffic and distant city life, a soundtrack to my perfectly mundane Tuesday morning detention. A detention for public intoxication, ironically. Nothing dangerous, nothing exciting, just another stumble in a long line of 'em, ensuring I'd spend the first half of my week staring at the chipped paint on these cinder block walls. Officer Miller, a man whose face was a permanent fixture of mild annoyance, typed at his desk, the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of his keyboard a grating counterpoint to the throb behind my eyes. I was counting the seconds until my lawyer called, until this absurd farce was over. But then, the hum outside changed. It wasn't just traffic anymore, it was a cacophony. A sudden piercing shriek that cut through the mundane drone like a shattered window pane. Then another, and another, multiplying, spiraling into a chorus of raw animal terror that ripped through the thin walls of the station, through my skull, and settled deep in my gut like a stone. My breath caught. Miller stopped typing. His fingers hovered over the keys, his head slowly rising. The quiet dread that followed the screams was worse than the screams themselves. A silence so profound it felt like the world outside had just stopped. What the hell was that? My mind raced, trying to find a rational explanation. A car crash? A massive pileup? But the sounds, the sheer panicked quality of them, felt different. Not mechanical, but visceral. Human. A low growl rumbled from the next cell. Not a human growl, not even close. It was deeper, guttural, like something feral trapped in a cage. Old man Tiber, who'd been picked up for shoplifting a 6-pack of beer, stirred on his thin cot. His eyes, usually clouded with an alcoholic haze, were wide and bloodshot, staring at the ceiling. He'd been muttering to himself for hours, but now a strange wet cough tore through him. He pressed a trembling hand to his chest. Just a bad flu, I hope. Miller, his face now a mask of confusion, picked up his radio. Unit 7 to dispatch. What was that noise? We've got multiple reports of disturbances coming in. Static hissed back. Nothing coherent. Just a high-pitched, garbled squeal that ended abruptly with a sickening wet crunch. Miller's hand tightened on the radio, knuckles white. His eyes darted to the single narrow window overlooking Main Street, then to me, then to Tiber. The air in the station grew heavy, thick with unspoken questions. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against the encroaching silence. On the wall-mounted TV, usually playing endless local news loops, a breaking news banner flashed. Unconfirmed reports of mass violence. The anchors looked stunned, their polished smiles gone, replaced by expressions of genuine horror. The camera cut to shaky cell phone footage, a crowded park, people screaming, running, and in the center of it, a man was hunched over another, tearing at him with his teeth. The image flickered, then went to black. No, this isn't real. This can't be real. Miller, I shouted, rattling the bars. What's going on out there? He ignored me, his gaze fixed on Tiber. The old man was convulsing on his cot now, a terrifying silent seizure. His limbs thrashed, muscles rigid. A dark, viscous fluid bubbled from his mouth, staining the thin mattress. His skin was turning a sickly gray. The color drained from my face. This wasn't a flu. This was something else.
The front door of the precinct, a heavy, reinforced steel contraption, rattled once, then again harder. A low moan, a collective guttural sound, echoed from outside. It was the same sound I'd heard moments ago, but now it was closer, much closer. Miller snatched his pistol from his holster, his hand shaken so violently he almost dropped it. He fumbled with the clip, checking the rounds. His eyes were wide with a terror that mirrored my own. "Get back!" he bellowed, his voice cracking, pointing the gun at the front door. "Don't come any closer!" The door shuddered under a massive impact. Wood splintered around the frame, a thin crack appearing near the deadbolt. The moaning outside intensified, no longer just a sound, but a palpable presence, a hungry multitude pressing against the precinct's fragile shell. Tiber let out a final shuddering gasp. Then, with an unnatural, jerky movement, he pushed himself up. His head snapped toward Miller, his eyes completely white, devoid of pupils. His jaw hung slack, then stretched impossibly wide, revealing teeth stained with what looked like dried blood. A low, wet snarl tore from his throat. He lunged. Miller fired. The shot deafened me, echoing brutally in the confined space. Tiber's head snapped back, a geyser of blood exploding from his temple. But he didn't fall. He just kept coming, a relentless, inhuman automaton. Miller fired again, then a third time, emptying his clip into the old man's chest. Tiber finally stumbled, collapsing in a heap against the back wall of his cell, a gruesome parody of human death. But even then, his limbs twitched, his mouth still opened and closed in a silent snarl. Miller stared at the twitching corpse, his pistol clattering to the floor.
His face was ash gray, his eyes fixed in a blank stare of disbelief. He was frozen. He's useless. We're all useless. The main door groaned, the deadbolt giving way with a metallic shriek that scraped along my nerves. The steel door buckled inward, held only by its hinges, revealing a sliver of Main Street. And through that sliver, I saw them. Dozens, hundreds, a tide of shambling, moaning figures, their eyes glazed, their mouths agape, all pressing forward, a singular, mindless wave. The air outside was thick with the stench of decay, rot, and something else, something acrid and chemical, like burnt plastic and old blood. It stung my nostrils, making my eyes water. This is it. This is how it ends, my mind screamed, but my body felt strangely calm, almost analytical. A detached part of me was already assessing the situation, calculating angles, vulnerabilities. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was a different game, played by different rules. And that's when it hit me. The first unwritten rule of detention survival. The one they would never tell you. Rule number 1. The bars that hold you are also the walls that protect you. Learn to use them, or they will bury you. From my cell, I had a perfect view of the entire station. The open front door, the swarming dead, Miller's frozen form. The weapon locker, usually a fortress, now stood unlocked, its contents glinting in the dim light. And between me and that locker lay Miller, his dropped pistol, and a rapidly expanding pool of black, viscous fluid that was not blood. Whatever Tiber was infected with, it was leaking from him now,
an oily stain seeping into the concrete. The first infected shuffled through the broken front door. A woman, her hair matted with blood, one arm hanging at a grotesque angle. She didn't walk, she lurched, propelled by an unknown force, her dead eyes scanning the room for movement. She saw Miller. Her head snapped toward him with an audible crack of cartilage. A guttural moan escaped her throat, and she shambled forward. Miller, still in shock, barely reacted as she closed the distance. Her hands, long and skeletal, clamped onto his shoulders. He let out a choked cry, finally jolting out of his stupor. He tried to push her away, but her strength was horrifying, unnatural. She brought her face close to his, jaws opening wide. "Miller, get your gun!" I screamed, my voice raw. But he couldn't. His hands were pinned, his face contorted in a silent scream. Her teeth clamped down on his neck. A sickening tear of flesh, a gush of dark blood. He thrashed for a moment, then went limp, his eyes wide and unseeing, staring at the ceiling. He was gone, just like that, swallowed by the nightmare. The woman pulled back, her face smeared with Miller's blood. Her eyes, milky and dead, scanned the room again. She saw me, and the thing that had been Miller. He began to stir. Oh, God, no! My heart seized in my chest. Not him, not Miller. But it was too late. He shuddered, convulsed, then slowly, stiffly pushed himself to his feet. His head lolled to one side, his uniform already stained with his own darkening blood. His eyes, now dull and gray, found me. He started to shuffle towards my cell, his movements mirroring the woman's. I backed into the furthest corner of my cell, pressing myself against the cold cinder block. The bars, they're supposed to protect me. But how long before they figured out how to get through? The weapon locker, still open, was now even more tantalizing, a beacon of hope just out of reach. It was maybe 15 feet away, through a gauntlet of the shambling dead. Miller's pistol lay on the floor, closer, but still outside my grasp. This cell was a trap, a temporary shield, nothing more, unless I could turn it into something else. I started scanning my environment again, but this time with a new urgency. Not for escape routes, but for tools, anything. The toilet, bolted to the floor. The metal bunk, also bolted. A thin, scratchy mattress, useless. The small plastic cup I'd been given for water, pathetic. More infected were pouring through the main door now. The precinct was quickly becoming a slaughterhouse, a writhing mass of reanimated corpses. The sounds were grotesque, wet snarls, guttural moans, the scrape of their feet on the linoleum. The smell intensified, a cloying, putrid scent of death and decay. One of them, a massive man in a torn postal uniform, stumbled into the weapon locker door, slamming it shut with a clang that echoed through the station. No! My only chance! He leaned against the locker, his back to me, his attention fixed on something else. The keys. Where are the keys? Miller's keys. They would have opened that locker. I looked at Miller's reanimated corpse, now shuffling slowly towards my cell, its hands outstretched, mouth snapping. The keys weren't on him. He hadn't been carrying them. Then where? My eyes darted to Miller's desk, messy, coffee cup, files, and then I saw it. A small brass key ring, glinting innocently beside his computer monitor. Too far, miles away, through a crowd of the dead. No, not miles, just 20 feet. 20 feet of absolute hell. The thing that had been Miller reached my cell. Its fingers, thick and gray, wrapped around the bars, shaking them with surprising force. The entire frame groaned. Its dead eyes fixed on me. Its mouth opened in a silent scream. I could feel its fetid breath, sickly sweet and metallic, on my face.
This was the first lesson of detention survival. Proximity is a double-edged sword. You're safe inside until what's outside learns how to reach you. I needed to buy time. I needed a distraction. I looked at the only other living thing in the cell block, Tiber. His corpse still twitched occasionally. I grabbed the flimsy plastic cup and hurled it at the dead old man. It bounced harmlessly off his shoulder. Useless. The infected outside my cell were growing in number. 2, then 3, then 5, all pressing against the bars, their moans a low, continuous rumble against my ear. They were a slow-motion wave, patiently eroding my last sanctuary. I had to think. I had to move. My gaze fell on the metal bench. Bolted down, yes, but what if? I tested it. Solid. Too heavy to move. But the mattress. Thin, stained, but flexible. I tore it loose, ripping the flimsy straps that held it. I rolled it into a tight cylinder. Not a weapon, but an extension. Okay, Alex, think. Think like the desperate man you are. You're in a box. There's a better box with weapons in it. And between you and that box is a whole lot of death. Rule number 2 of detention survival, I was learning, was this. Every confined space has a weakness, and every weakness can be turned into an opportunity. They don't want you to know that the very structure designed to contain you can become your greatest asset, if you're willing to break it. I needed those keys, and I needed them fast. Miller's former self was still pulling at the bars, the metal groaning ominously. I had to clear the path. I had to draw them away. I started making noise, not screaming, that would just attract more, but a rhythmic banging against the bars with my rolled-up mattress. Clang, clang, clang. It worked. The infected outside my cell, their movements sluggish, turned their dead eyes towards the sound. More of them shuffled closer, drawn by the new stimulus. They started pressing against my cell, their outstretched hands like grotesque tendrils. The middle of the station, where Miller's desk and the keys lay, began to clear ever so slightly. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I dropped to the floor, stomach pressing against the grimy concrete. The reek of decay was overpowering down here. I pushed the mattress through the gap at the bottom of the bars, stretching my arm as far as it would go. It felt like my shoulder was tearing from its socket. My fingers brushed empty air. Still too far. Maybe 8 feet away from the desk. Damn it. I pulled back, my arm aching. One of the infected outside, its face a pulpy mess, let out a wet gurgle, its fingers brushing my hair through the bars. Too close. I needed another tool, something to extend my reach further. I looked around my cell again. Nothing. Just the bolted toilet, the immovable bench. Wait, The toilet, the porcelain tank. Could I break it? Use a piece of the ceramic? I kicked at the base of the toilet with my worn sneaker. Nothing. It was solid. I slammed my fist against the side of the porcelain tank. A dull thud. It held. Frustration gnawed at me. Every second was a minute closer to becoming food for these things. Then I remembered the vent. High up near the ceiling, a rusty metal grate. It was small, maybe 6 inches by 6, but I'd noticed it earlier, idly wondering where it led. It was too high to reach, but I could climb. I used the metal bunk as a precarious step, my feet slipping on the slick surface. I reached for the vent, my fingers scrabbling against the cool metal. The screws were rusted, but still held fast. I needed something to pry it open. I looked at the thin, flimsy toothbrush I'd been given that morning. A joke. But maybe the handle. I jammed the plastic handle into the crack of the vent, twisting. It bent. Useless. The noise from the main room was growing. More slamming against the front door. More bodies pushing through the already broken frame. The precinct was a funnel, drawing them in. And I was at the narrow end. Focus, Alex. What's around you? What's strong enough? My eyes landed on the toilet again. Not the tank, but the toilet seat. Hard plastic, attached with 2 metal bolts. Could I break it free? I yanked at it, putting all my meager strength into it. The plastic creaked, groaned. One bolt popped free with a sharp thwack. The other was tougher. I twisted, pulled, and finally, with a groan of exertion, the second bolt gave way. The toilet seat came off in my hands. It wasn't much, a hard, curved piece of plastic, but it had sharp edges where the bolts had been. I wedged one of those sharp edges into the vent grate, twisting and prying. Screech! Metal shrieked against metal. The rusted screws protested, then, one by one, gave way. The vent cover popped off and clattered to the floor outside my cell, creating a small diversion. A few infected shuffled toward the sound, their moans rising in pitch. Good. I reached into the dark vent shaft. It was dusty, grimy, smelling of stale air and forgotten things. My fingers brushed against something hard, metallic. I pulled it out. A broken broom handle. Half a handle, maybe 2 feet long, snapped cleanly in the middle. Perfect. I tied my rolled-up mattress to the end of the broom handle with strips of fabric torn from my shirt. It wasn't elegant, but it was an extension. I dropped to the floor again, heart pounding, sweat stinging my eyes. I shoved a makeshift contraption through the bars, aiming for Miller's desk. The mattress end slid across the grimy floor. Closer, closer. I nudged a stapler off the desk, then a pile of papers. The keys, still glinting brass, were almost within reach. I stretched, twisting the handle, trying to hook the key ring. Thump! The thing that had been Miller slammed its full weight against my cell bars. The concrete around the mounting points cracked audibly. A spider web of fracture spread across the cinder block wall. Not long now. I took a deep breath, ignored the terror clawing at my throat. Focus. I nudged the keys again. They slid an inch, then another, closer to the edge of the desk. I needed them to fall, just fall. I hooked the broom handle under the edge of the desk, pulling gently. The desk scraped against the linoleum. The keys teetered. Clink! They fell, landing with a soft jingle on the floor, still about 5 feet from my cell. Damn it! I almost screamed in frustration. So close. The station was a nightmare now, more infected than I could count. They were feeding on Miller's body, their wet, tearing sounds making my stomach churn.
The postal worker still blocked the weapon locker. I needed those keys, and I needed them now. I noticed a new sound, a dull scraping from the cell opposite mine, Tiber's cell. The reanimated Tiber was pushing against the back wall of his cell, trying to get out. His strength was incredible. The thin concrete was already showing cracks. He'll be out soon. And then what? 2 of them in the cell block? I looked at the key ring, the small brass key Miller had used to check his weapon earlier. The one that probably opened the locker was clearly visible. It was taunting me. I pulled back the broom handle. What if I could create another diversion? Something to draw them even further away from the keys. I looked at the broken window at the front of the station, through which the swarm had entered. The street outside was a chaotic mess, but maybe. I grabbed a loose piece of concrete that had flaked off my wall. Heavy, jagged. I took aim at the window, winding up my arm, ignoring the frantic thrashing of the infected around my bars. This was a gamble. I hurled the chunk of concrete. It sailed through the air, shattered another pane of glass in the precinct's main window, and landed with a loud crash on the street outside. It worked. For a split second, a dozen heads turned towards the sound. Their low moans rose in a collective query. And then, slowly, sluggishly, the infected in the middle of the station started to shuffle towards the broken window, drawn by the new noise, the fresh scent of disruption. The path to the keys was clearer. Not completely clear, but clearer. A narrow lane, maybe 3 feet wide, opened up between the shifting bodies. I jammed the broom handle through the bars again, the mattress end brushing the floor. This time, I moved with frantic precision, sweeping the mattress in wide arcs. The key ring jangled, slid, caught on a small piece of debris. I swept again, harder. It slid another foot, then another. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the keys moved towards my cell. One infected, a tall, gaunt man in a business suit, shuffled back towards the keys, his dead eyes twitching. He was gonna step on him. No! I tried to sweep faster. The keys were only 2 feet away now. I could almost reach them. The man stepped on the keys. They disappeared beneath his foot. My heart sank. This was it. It was over. But then, as he took another shuffling step, his foot caught on the key ring. The keys didn't stay under his foot. They slid with him, dragging along the floor, straight towards my cell. He stumbled, falling to his knees. His hand brushed the bars of my cell, then his head slammed against the concrete. He lay there, twitching, the key ring still hooked on his shoe. He was right outside my cell, inches away. Unbelievable. I didn't hesitate. I dropped to the floor, jamming my arm through the bottom of the bars, stretching, straining, my fingers reaching, scraping against the rough concrete. The infected above me were in a frenzy, their fingers grasping at my hair, my back, but I ignored them. My fingers brushed the cold metal of the keys. I wrapped them around the ring, pulling back with all my might. Success! The keys were in my hand, a jangling, chaotic mess of a dozen different keys. My arm was raw, scratched, but I had 'em. My breath hitched in my chest. This was it. This was my chance. I stood up, fumbling with the keys, my eyes darting between the cluster in my hand and the locked cell door. Which one? There must be one for the cells? The small silver one? The larger brass one Lou had used for the weapon locker? I tried the smallest one first, shoved it into the lock with shaking hands. It didn't turn. Wrong one. The bars of Tiber's cell creaked violently. He was almost through. A large chunk of concrete tore loose from the wall, crashing to the floor of his cell. The gap in the bars was wider now. He was gonna get out. I tried another key, a slightly larger one, serrated. It fit. I turned it. Click. The lock mechanism groaned, then disengaged. The heavy steel door swung inward with a low squeal of rusty hinges. I was free. The moment the door opened, 3 of the closest infected lunged. The thing that had been Miller was among them, his gray hands outstretched. I didn't think, didn't hesitate. I grabbed the first thing I could reach, the broken broom handle, and swung. It connected with the Miller thing's head with a sickening crack. It stumbled, but didn't fall. Still not enough. I scrambled back towards Miller's desk, my eyes on the weapon locker. I needed a gun, a real gun. As I retreated, another infected, a woman with a torn nurse's uniform, grabbed my arm. Her fingers were cold, surprisingly strong. She pulled, sending a jolt of pain through my shoulder. I twisted, breaking free, ripping a sleeve. I brought the broom handle down again, this time on her knee. A crunch. She staggered. I reached Miller's desk, my eyes sweeping over its surface for anything useful. His pistol, still on the floor. I snatched it up, my fingers closing around the cold, textured grip. It felt heavy, solid, real. This was a tool. This was power. The infected were closing in. 3 of them were already between me and the weapon locker. The postal worker still leaned against the locker door, unaware, still moaning softly. I raised the pistol, aiming for the head of the Miller thing. My hands were shaking, adrenaline coursing through me. Breathe, Alex. Focus. I squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked, deafening in the enclosed space. The Miller thing's head snapped back, a spray of dark fluid erupting from where the bullet had entered. It dropped like a stone. Yes. 2 more were on me, the nurse and another infected, a young man with a backpack still slung over his shoulder, his face half-eaten. I fired twice more, rapid succession, aiming for the head. The nurse stumbled, a gaping hole in her forehead. The young man went down, but the shots attracted more. From Tiber's cell, a low growl erupted. He had broken free. The shambling corpse of old man Tiber, his body contorted, lurched out of his cell, heading straight for me. His eyes were milky white, his jaw agape. Another one. This was the real world now, the world they didn't want you to know. A world where every second was a fight for survival, and the only rules were the ones you learned the hard way. I spun, facing Tiber. He was surprisingly fast. I fired. The bullet caught him in the shoulder. He staggered but kept coming. I fired again. This time the shot went high, grazing his skull. He kept coming. Damn it! I was almost out of ammo. I checked the clip. 2 rounds left. 2 rounds against a tidal wave. Panic began to set in, a cold, creeping dread. Then I remembered the weapon locker, the brass key. I still had the key ring clutched in my left hand. I looked at the postal worker, still slumped against the locker door, oblivious. He was blocking my only way to real firepower. Rule 3 of detention survival, I realized in that moment of desperation. When all paths are blocked, create your own, even if it means using the monsters as stepping stones. I aimed the pistol at the postal worker, not at his head. Not to kill him, at his legs. I fired the second to last round. The bullet struck his thigh. He let out a low, guttural moan, a sound of pain, even in death. His body spasmed. Then he collapsed,
falling away from the locker door. Free! The locker was free! I jammed the brass key into the lock of the weapon locker. It turned with a satisfying click. The door swung open, revealing a treasure trove. Shotguns, rifles, boxes of ammunition, tactical vests, stun grenades. A veritable arsenal. Tiber was almost on me. His rotting hands reached out, grasping. I dropped the pistol, grabbed a shotgun from the locker. It felt heavy, solid, a comforting weight in my hands. I pumped it, a decisive clack-clack. The sound, mechanical and deadly, echoed through the station. It was the sound of hope. I swung the shotgun up, aiming for Tiber's head, my finger already on the trigger. His dead eyes were inches from mine. This wasn't Old Man Tiber anymore. This was a monster. This was what I had to become to survive. A killer. I fired. The blast was deafening, a visceral explosion that ripped through the air. Tiber's head exploded in a gruesome shower of bone and fluid. His body dropped, lifeless, for good this time. The rest of the infected, drawn by the sound of the shotgun, turned their attention to me. Dozens of dead eyes fixed on my position. Their moans rose in a collective crescendo. They started to shuffle forward, a relentless, unthinking tide. I pumped the shotgun again, loaded with new shells from the locker. Clack, clack. My hands, though still trembling, were steadier now. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach. But it was overshadowed by a grim determination. I had survived detention. I had broken free. Now I had to survive the world outside. I looked at the ammunition boxes, the rifles, the grenades. Enough to fight for now. But how long? How long until the ammunition ran out? How long until I was overwhelmed? The precinct was a death trap. I had to get out. I had to find other survivors. I had to understand what they didn't want me to know about this new, horrific world. I turned towards the shattered front door, the swirling chaos of Main Street stretching into the hazy distance, an endless maze of death and uncertainty. This was just the beginning. The detention was over. The real survival had just begun. My grip tightened on the shotgun. What would I find out there? What new, unwritten rules would I be forced to learn? I didn't know, but I would. The first wave of infected surged towards the weapon locker. I took aim. The barrel felt cold against my cheek. My finger found the trigger. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what I was fighting for. Everything. The main entrance of the precinct was a gaping maw, exhaling the stench of decay and drawing in the ceaseless tide of the dead. I stood, shotgun raised, in the heart of the station, surrounded by broken furniture, splattered blood, and the twitching remains of Miller and Tiber. The air thrummed with the low, persistent moan of the horde. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against the encroaching chaos. This was my new reality. Every breath a defiance, every step a gamble. I fired the shotgun, sending a blast into the chest of the nearest infected. It stumbled, its torso a gaping wound, but kept coming. Not a headshot, rookie mistake. I adjusted my aim, pumped, and fired again.
The second shot took it in the temple, blowing out the back of its skull. It dropped. Two more lurched forward, drawn by the noise, their dead eyes fixed on me. I dropped both with quick, precise headshots, the recoil jarring my shoulder. 4 shots, 4 dead. But for every one I dropped, 2 more seemed to appear. They were coming in from the street, crawling over the debris of the collapsed front door, a ceaseless flowing mass of decaying flesh. The station was a funnel, and I was at its narrowest point. I couldn't hold this position forever. My eyes darted around the room, searching for an exit, a different route. The back door, leading to what I remembered as an alleyway in the employee parking lot. It was metal, heavy, and crucially still intact. A glimmer of hope. But between me and that door was a writhing mass of 20, maybe 30 infected. And the weapon locker, my temporary sanctuary, wouldn't last if they converged on it. I needed a plan, a quick, brutal plan. I glanced at the tactical vests in the locker. One was a heavy-duty, police-issue vest, thick with ceramic plates. I ripped it off the rack, shrugging it on quickly. It was heavy, restrictive, but the added protection was invaluable. Better than nothing against a stray bite. I grabbed 2 more boxes of shotgun shells, a spare pistol, and an extra magazine, stuffing them into the vest's pouches. Every ounce of prep mattered now. The infected were closer. One, a thin woman with stringy hair, reached the counter that separated the main reception area from the officers' desks. She clawed at it, her fingers scraping against the laminate, a grotesque parody of life. I fired, dropping her. The others continued their slow, relentless advance. How do I get to that back door? It was 20 yards, easily, through the thickest part of the horde. My gaze fell on the desks and filing cabinets that had formed Miller's pathetic barricade against the front door. They were scattered, toppled, but some were still standing, creating small pockets of cover. A path, however tenuous.
This was the 4th unwritten rule I was internalizing, a brutal lesson in adapting on the fly. Every obstacle is a potential weapon, and every pathway is a calculated risk. They don't want you to know that the very tools of bureaucracy can be repurposed for survival, or that hesitation is a death sentence. I decided on a strategy. Fire, move, find cover, repeat. My movements had to be fluid, decisive, no wasted motion. I pumped the shotgun, took aim, and fired into the approaching horde. 2 went down. I immediately sprinted to the nearest overturned desk, ducking behind its steel frame, as 3 more converged on where I'd been. They slammed into the desk, their moans echoing inches from my ears. I peered around the side of the desk, lining up a shot. Crack! Another head exploded. I moved again, a desperate zigzag through the carnage, using the scattered furniture as a shield. The smell of blood and gunpowder was overwhelming now. My lungs burned. I reached another filing cabinet, its drawers hanging open like gaping mouths. I risked a quick glance at the back door. Still 20 yards, but the density of the horde was thinning in the immediate path due to my constant movement and desperate shots. Keep going. The pistol felt light in my hand, a welcome change from the heavy shotgun. I drew it, aiming for quick headshots, conserving shotgun shells for when they inevitably overwhelmed me. The pistol cracked, crackled, dropping 3 more. Just like target practice, except the targets are real, and they want to eat me. Suddenly, a new sound, a whimper.
From behind a toppled desk near the broken reception counter, a small figure stirred. A young girl, maybe 10 years old, huddled in a ball, covered in dust and grime, her eyes wide with terror. A child. My heart lurched. Every fiber of my being screamed to run, to leave her, to save myself. She was a liability, a slow-in factor, a death sentence in this nightmare. But something primal, something human, wouldn't let me. "Hey," I hissed, ducking behind another filing cabinet. "Over here. Stay low." She looked at me, her face streaked with tears and dirt, her small body trembling. The infected were closing in on her position, drawn by her whimpers. One, a tall man missing an arm, shuffled towards her, his mouth agape. Damn it. I had to choose. My escape or her life. This was the kind of impossible choice they never prepared you for. The kind that stripped away your humanity piece by piece. But I hadn't lost it all yet. Not completely. I raised the shotgun. "Go," I yelled, firing a blast that tore through the armless man's skull. "Run to the back door." The shot drew the attention of more infected. They turned, their collective moan rising. The girl, spurred by the blast, scrambled to her feet and darted towards me. She was fast, surprisingly agile. She reached my position, crouching beside me, breathing heavily. Her small hand gripped my torn sleeve, cold and clammy. "My name's Lily," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Thank you." "Later," I growled, pumping the shotgun. "We need to go, now." This was the fifth unwritten rule, a lesson about the fragile thread of humanity. The greatest dangers are the ones you choose to carry, but sometimes they're the only things that remind you who you are. They don't want you to know that a heart still beating is both a weakness and a strength. Getting to the back door with Lily was a whole new level of hell. I had to shield her, guard her, make split-second decisions, not just for myself, but for her. Every step was a terrifying ballet of violence and desperate protection. I kept the shotgun loaded, firing only when absolutely necessary, dropping the closest threats with precise headshots. Lily, surprisingly, stayed low, keeping close, a small shadow behind my legs. She didn't scream, didn't cry out, just moved with a quiet, desperate urgency. We reached the back door. It was heavy steel, bolted shut from the inside. A simple deadbolt, but it felt like a fortress. I fumbled with the key ring, my hand shaking. Which one? Which damn key? The horde was closing in. They had realized our objective. Their moans rose, a hungry chorus, echoing in the confined space. Their decaying fingers scraped against the metal door. "Get ready," I gritted out, desperately trying keys. The first one, a small, intricate one, didn't fit. The second, larger, slid in. I turned. Click! The deadbolt retracted with a solid thunk. I grabbed the handle, twisted, and threw the door open. A blast of stale, hot air hit us, carrying with it the smell of exhaust fumes and distant burning. We were in an alleyway, narrow and choked with dumpsters and overflowing trash bins. An old, beaten-up police cruiser sat idling, its engine a low rumble, its front windows shattered. "Get in!" I screamed, pushing Lily through the door. She scrambled into the back seat. I turned, shotgun raised, and fired into the 3 infected who had burst into the alley from around a dumpster, drawn by the open door. 2 dropped. The third stumbled, its head half gone, but still moving. I put another round into it. It dropped. I jumped into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut. The cruiser's interior was a mess of papers, empty coffee cups, and a pervasive smell of stale cigarettes. The keys were already in the ignition. Someone had left it running. A stroke of luck or a cruel joke. "Hold on," I yelled, throwing the cruiser into reverse.
The tires squealed, peeling out, slamming into a dumpster. Lily let out a small cry from the back. I adjusted, flooring the accelerator. The cruiser lurched forward, speeding down the alley, leaving the shambling horde behind. We burst onto a back street, deserted, lined with darkened storefronts. The only light came from the flickering fires burning in the distance, painting the sky a sickly orange-red. The city was a funeral pyre. We were out. We had escaped detention. But what now? I looked in the rearview mirror. Lily was huddled in the back seat, her eyes fixed on the retreating city lights, her face pale, almost ghostly in the dashboard glow. She was silent, but her small hands were clenched tight. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice rough. She nodded, a faint tremor running through her. "Where are we going?" "Away," I said, my voice grim. "As far away from here as possible." The cruiser sped through the deserted streets, the engine a throaty rumble, the only sound apart from my own ragged breathing and Lily's quiet sniffling. Every intersection was a gamble, every dark alley a potential ambush. The air outside grew thicker with smoke and the omnipresent scent of decay. I kept my eyes peeled, scanning the darkened streets, the silent buildings. Where were the others? Were there any others? The sheer scale of the nightmare was slowly beginning to sink in. This wasn't just a localized event. This was the end of the world as I knew it. "My mom," Lily whispered from the back seat, her voice cracking. "She was at work, downtown. I need to find her." I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. Downtown. That was probably ground zero, a death trap. "We can't go downtown, Lily. It's too dangerous." "But she's there," she cried, a fresh wave of tears streaming down her face. "She's probably scared. She needs me." My gut twisted. I remembered the feeling of helplessness, trapped in that cell, unable to do anything. Now I had a choice. Risk everything for a potentially futile search, or stay alive. This was the 6th unwritten rule, though I hadn't articulated it yet. The greatest battles are fought within yourself, between the desire for survival and the pull of what once was. They don't want you to know that the hardest choices are the ones that demand you sacrifice a piece of your soul, or the hope of what you've lost. I looked at Lily in the rearview mirror, her small, hopeful face, her desperate need. It broke my hardened resolve. "Okay," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We'll try, but we move smart, we move fast, and if it's too dangerous, we turn back. Understood?" She nodded, wiping her eyes, a flicker of hope in her gaze. "Understood." I changed direction, heading east, towards what used to be the bustling heart of the city. The further we drove, the worse it got. Abandoned cars littered the roads, some mangled, others just sitting there, doors ajar, like ghosts of a hurried exodus. Fires raged in apartment buildings, casting grotesque shadows that danced in our headlights. The streets were eerily quiet, punctuated only by the distant moans of the dead. We had to abandon the cruiser 3 blocks from the downtown core. A massive pileup blocked the entire street,
a twisted metal graveyard of cars, buses, and overturned trucks. Smoke billowed from a burning tanker, painting the sky black. "We go on foot from here," I said, grabbing the shotgun. "Stay close. Don't make a sound unless I tell you to. Got it?" Lily nodded, her small face grim. She was showing a resilience I hadn't expected from a child. Maybe she's a survivor, too. We picked our way through the wreckage, stepping over broken glass and discarded belongings. The air was thick with the smell of burnt rubber, gasoline, and the ever-present stench of the dead. Every shadow seemed to hold a lurking terror. My senses were on high alert, ears straining for the telltale shuffle, eyes scanning for any movement. "Where exactly did your mom work?" I whispered as we navigated a particularly dark alley. "The Peterson building," Lily replied, her voice hushed. "It's a big office building, 20 stories. She was on the 15th floor. 15 floors, a vertical climb through a potential nightmare. My heart sank, but I kept my face neutral. "Okay, we'll find it." We reached the edge of the downtown core. It was a war zone. The streets were filled with the dead, milling aimlessly, occasionally lurching towards a distant sound. The sheer density of them was terrifying. A living, breathing, or unbreathing carpet of death. The Peterson building, a glass and steel monolith, stood dark and silent, a towering tomb against the fiery sky. "Stay low," I whispered, pulling Lily behind a derelict hot dog stand. The stench of stale grease mixed with decay was nauseating. "We need to get inside without being seen." I scanned the building. The ground floor entrance was boarded up, but the glass was shattered in several places, creating gaps. A perfect entry point. But a dozen infected were milling around the entrance. How do we draw them away? I looked at the surrounding buildings. A construction site across the street, piles of debris, steel beams. An idea sparked. "Stay here," I whispered to Lily. "Don't move. Don't make a sound. I'll be right back." Her eyes were wide with fear, but she nodded, pressing herself deeper into the shadows. I crept out, pistol in hand, moving like a ghost through the wreckage. I made my way to the construction site, my footsteps light on the broken concrete. I found what I was looking for, a pile of loose rebar, long and heavy. I selected one, a jagged, rusted length of steel. I returned to the hot dog stand. "Okay," I whispered, "listen carefully. When I throw this, they'll turn. You run to the building entrance, straight inside. Find somewhere to hide. I'll follow as fast as I can. Got it?" She nodded, her small face resolute. "Got it." I took a deep breath, the adrenaline a bitter taste in my mouth. I hefted the rebar, aimed for a row of parked cars 2 blocks down, away from the Peterson building. This was a gamble. It had to work. I hurled the rebar with all my might. It sailed through the air, clattering loudly as it struck the side of an old taxi, followed by the shattering of glass. The sound echoed in the preternatural quiet of the ruined city. Immediately, the infected around the Peterson building turned. Their collective moans rose, and they began to shamble towards the noise, a slow, shuffling tide moving away from the entrance. "Go!" I shouted at Lily. She didn't hesitate. She darted out from behind the hot dog stand. a tiny figure against the backdrop of destruction, and sprinted towards the building. I watched, my heart in my throat, as she dove through a shattered window on the ground floor, disappearing into the darkness within. Now it was my turn. I followed, sprinting across the street, past the last few stragglers of the horde, and through the same shattered window. The lobby of the Peterson building was a cavernous, terrifying space. Moonlight filtered through the broken windows, casting long, eerie shadows that danced like phantoms. The air was still, heavy with the scent of dust and something vaguely metallic. The polished marble floors were cracked and stained with dried blood. Overturned furniture, scattered papers, and discarded briefcases lay everywhere, silent testaments to a frantic evacuation. "Lily?" I whispered, my voice echoing in the vast space. "Where are you?" No answer, only the sound of my own ragged breathing. Then a faint whimper from behind the deserted reception desk. I moved towards it, shotgun raised. Lily was huddled in a corner, trembling, her eyes wide with fear. "I told you to hide," I said, my voice softer now. "Good job." She managed a weak smile. "It's so dark." "I know," I said, scanning the lobby. The elevators were dead, of course. Power was out everywhere. That meant the stairs. 20 floors. This was the 7th unwritten rule of detention survival, extending beyond the precinct walls. Every sanctuary is a potential tomb, and every ascent is a descent into deeper danger.
They don't want you to know that the higher you climb, the more isolated and desperate you become. "Stairs," I grunted, pointing to a dimly lit stairwell door in the corner. "That's our way up." Lily looked at the dark stairwell, then back at me, her small hand finding mine. "Okay." We moved towards the stairwell, our footsteps echoing unnervingly on the marble. I pushed the heavy door open cautiously. It led to a concrete stairwell, dark and claustrophobic. The air was stale, still, no light. I pulled out my phone, fumbling with it. Dead, of course. Lily had a small pink keychain light. She clicked it on. A tiny beam of light cut through the gloom, barely illuminating the steps in front of us. Better than nothing. "All right, Lily," I whispered. "Stay behind me. Don't touch anything. Don't make any noise. We take it one step at a time." The ascent was a nightmare of creaking steps, whispering shadows, and the constant fear of what lay around the next corner. Each floor was identical. A heavy fire door, a small landing, then another flight of stairs. The silence was oppressive, punctuated only by our heavy breathing and the faint click, click, click of Lily's tiny light. We reached the 5th floor. The fire door to the office space was ajar. A low moan drifted out. I froze, pressing myself and Lily against the concrete wall. I peered through the crack. The office was dark, filled with overturned chairs and scattered papers. A lone infected, a woman in a business suit, was shuffling slowly down the hallway, her back to us. "Okay, just one. We can sneak past." I slowly pulled the stairwell door shut, careful not to make a sound. We waited, pressed together in the dark, listening to the shuffling sounds of the infected woman slowly recede. After a minute, the sounds faded. "Coast clear," I whispered. "Let's go." We continued our climb. 10 floors, 12 floors. My legs ached, my lungs burned. Lily was remarkably quiet, just following my lead, her small light unwavering. She's tougher than she looks. On the 13th floor, the stairwell was different. A smear of dark, dried blood stained the wall. A shoe lay on the landing, a single high-heeled pump abandoned in haste. My gut tightened. Something happened here. "Wait," I whispered to Lily, stopping dead. I listened. Nothing. Just the pounding of my own blood in my ears. I nudged the fire door to the office floor with my shotgun. It swung inward silently. The office space was a disaster. Chairs were overturned, cubicles smashed. Papers were scattered everywhere, forming a thick carpet of white. The windows were shattered, letting in a cold, unforgiving wind that whistled through the broken glass, carrying with it the distant wails of the city. And then I saw it. A body. Or what was left of one, half-eaten, slumped against a desk, its eyes wide and glassy. A name tag, barely visible, read Kevin. "Stay behind me, Lily," I hissed, pushing her gently back into the stairwell. "Don't look." I scanned the room. No movement. The dead body was chilling, a stark reminder of what happened here. A frantic struggle, no escape. I decided to check the next floor. 14th, 15. We were almost there. Just 2 more floors. The 14th floor was clear, silent, deserted. A glimmer of hope. Maybe Lily's mom made it. Maybe she escaped. We reached the 15th floor. The fire door was closed, but a thin sliver of light emanated from underneath it. Light. That meant power, or at least a working generator. Or something else. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the moment of truth. "Lily," I whispered, "your mom's office. Which way?" She pointed a trembling finger down a long, dark corridor. "3rd door on the left. Her name is Sarah." I nodded, gripping the shotgun. I pushed the door open slowly, just a crack. The light inside was artificial, a harsh fluorescent hum. The office space was orderly, unnervingly so compared to the lower floors. Cubicles stood intact, computers sat on desks, some still powered on, displaying static screens. Too quiet, too clean. My instincts screamed danger. "Stay here, Lily," I whispered, "right here. Don't move until I say so." I slipped through the door, moving with slow, deliberate steps, shotgun ready. The silence was absolute, save for the hum of the lights. The carpet muffled my footsteps. I crept down the corridor, passing empty cubicles. Where were the bodies? Where was the chaos? Then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic scratching sound from the 3rd door on the left, Lily's mom's office. My heart almost stopped. No, please, no. I reached the door. It was slightly ajar. The scratching sound was louder now, coming from inside. It was a wet, grating sound, like fingernails on drywall. I pushed the door open just wide enough to peek inside. The office was small, neat. A large window overlooked the burning city. And in the center of the room, hunched over a desk, was a woman. Her back was to me. Her hair, long and brown, was streaked with dark fluid. She was wearing a sensible business suit. She was scratching at the desktop, a low guttural moan rumbling in her throat. "Mom?" Lily's voice, small and hopeful, whispered from behind me. She had disobeyed. She had followed me. The woman froze. Her head slowly, unnervingly turned towards us. Her eyes were milky white, her face pale and drawn. Her mouth was slack, hanging open. And then she saw Lily. A wet snarl tore from her throat.
It was Lily's mom, or what was left of her.
"No!" Lily screamed, a sound of pure, unadulterated heartbreak. She ran forward, tears streaming down her face towards her mother. "Lily, no! Stop!" I shouted, but it was too late. She was already halfway across the room. The infected Sarah lunged. It was fast, faster than I expected. She slammed into Lily, sending the small girl sprawling to the floor. Sarah immediately bent over her, jaw opening wide. My blood ran cold. I had failed. I had led her to her death. I raised the shotgun, my hands trembling. Shoot! Shoot her! Save Lily! But the image of Lily's hopeful face, the sound of her innocent scream, the horror of what I was about to do, it froze me. "Mom!" Lily screamed, a desperate, terrified cry. The sound seemed to trigger something. Sarah paused, her jaw hovering inches from Lily's throat. Her dead eyes flickered. A low, almost human moan escaped her, a sound of pain, not hunger. Then she looked at Lily's terrified face. For a single, impossible second, I saw it. A flicker of recognition, a ghost of humanity in those dead eyes. No, it can't be. Sarah pulled back, her movements jerky, unnatural. She looked at her daughter, then at her own outstretched, decaying hands, then at the bloody desk. A shudder ran through her. Then, with a speed I didn't expect, she turned and lunged, not at Lily, but at the large window overlooking the city. She crashed through the glass, a shower of shards exploding inward. Her body plummeted 15 stories to the street below, a silent, sickening descent. Silence. Absolute, terrifying silence. Lily lay on the floor, shaking, staring at the broken window. Her mother was gone. She had chosen to jump, to save her daughter. Even in death, a final, selfless act. I stood there, shotgun in hand, my mind reeling. What just happened? Did she really remember? Or was it just a desperate, dying twitch of something that used to be human? This was the 8th unwritten rule, a haunting truth that they would never acknowledge. Even in the deepest pits of depravity, humanity can sometimes flicker, a final ember against the encroaching darkness. They don't want you to know that the monsters you fight might still hold a sliver of the people they once were, forcing you to question everything. I walked over to Lily, kneeling beside her. She was crying now, silent, heartbreaking sobs that shook her small frame. I put a hand on her shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Lily." She didn't respond, just continued to cry, her eyes fixed on the empty, broken window. We stayed there for what felt like an eternity, Lily grieving, me trying to process what I had just witnessed. The sun began to set, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, a beautiful backdrop to a world in ruins. The distant sounds of the city's torment seemed to fade, replaced by a profound sense of loss. "We need to go," I finally said, my voice gentle. "Before it gets dark, more of them will be out." Lily slowly nodded, her eyes still raw, but a new grim determination settling on her face. She pushed herself up. Her small hand found mine again, but this time her grip was firmer, less trembling. We made our way back down the 15 flights of stairs, the descent feeling heavier, more somber than the climb. The journey was mostly quiet, the lower floors still deserted. The rebar I had thrown earlier was still on the street. The infected dispersed. The patrol car was still where I left it. We drove away from the city, leaving the burning skyscrapers and the memory of Sarah's final sacrifice behind. The road was clear now, the highway stretching into the darkening countryside. "Where now?" Lily asked, her voice small but steady. I looked at the endless road ahead, the silent fields stretching into the darkness. "We find somewhere safe, somewhere away from all this. We survive. For your mom, for everyone we lost." The cruiser drove into the night, its headlights cutting through the oppressive darkness. The city was a distant glow in the rearview mirror, a funeral pyre against the horizon. The memory of the unwritten rules I had learned in my detention and beyond was etched into my very soul. The bars that protected, the weaknesses that became opportunities, the use of monsters as stepping stones, the impossible choices that tested your humanity, and the haunting flicker of a soul in the eyes of a monster. I was a survivor, and I had a new purpose: to protect this child, to find others, to forge a new path in this broken world. And as for what they didn't want us to know, they were dead. Their rules were gone. Only ours remained, the rules of the living. My gaze drifted to Lily, sleeping fitfully in the back seat, her face streaked with dried tears. She was my new detention, my new cage, and my new freedom. What other rules would she force me to learn? The gas gauge was dropping fast. We needed to find a fuel station, a safe place to rest before dawn. The world was still out there, a hungry, waiting beast, and we were just two small figures driving into its vast, unknown maw. The night was long, and the rules of survival were just beginning to be truly written.